Mark Rogers TV back with you on college football. And if you followed us during this series, we've talked to Michigan, Nebraska, Oklahoma State, Connecticut, Miami, talking about the best wins in program history. So however you define that, we invite you to join in and comment. However you define that, winning championships, winning conference championships, knocking off an arch rival, some miraculous comeback victory, whatever it is. And we're talking BYU football right now with Mitch Harper from lawlessrepublic.com and also Cougars Center. Hey, Mitch, thanks so much for joining us again.
Yeah, excited to be here. BYU's had a rich tradition of some exciting wins, and definitely excited to talk about it.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, always is. Let's talk about BYU football. So run down the wins that have really stuck with you, those things that those events that have made you proud in looking back on BYU history, whether you watched it yourself or have just read the lore.
Yes, yeah. So it's a program that's had tremendous success. You know, we're talking in the one of the previous videos. BYU's had over the last 40 years, fifth in college football and most wins in all the country. You know, that's out of everyone. Who would have thought BYU would be fifth in wins? So this program has known only winning, really, averaging 9 wins a season, almost 9 wins a season over the last 40 years. This program has had some moments that have put them in the national mindset, and there's been some great ones. Thinking about this and thinking of ones I personally witnessed and ones that before my time, but I consider myself someone that's a BYU football historian, because the fascinating history of this underdog program that came out of nowhere in Provo, Utah, and built this passing juggernaut behind Lavelle Edwards, and it's fascinating to me. So I pinpoint some of the games here, and in no particular order. I got to start off, though. It's probably the number one win in BYU football history. It's 1990 Miami. And for those of you that's seen the 30 for 30, the U, this is even referenced in that, where Michael Irvin says, team like BYU shouldn't be even on the field as the Miami Hurricanes, and he probably threw up the U. Not the University of Utah U, none of that. That is the U, the real U. So yeah, 1990 Miami. I mean, that was something special. I mean, it was a game where forecasters posted a rare hurricane watch for Provo, Utah. The defending national champions were coming to town. I mean, this was the program of the 80s, and BYU was hosting them in Provo. In 1990 and in 1988, BYU was crushed by Miami in the Orange Bowl with Ty Detmer as a freshman quarterback. So there was revenge on the mind, and obviously Miami crushing BYU in '88. They came in and had that swagger that they were defined by, and they had it on full force going into that BYU game, and they didn't respect BYU at all. Dennis Erickson is the head coach, Lavelle, 2 legendary coaches on opposite sidelines. I mean, this game had everything. Amazing talent on the field, and Ty Detmer, that little gunslinger from San Antonio, Texas, with that Texas drawl, led BYU to an amazing win, and a win that propelled him to win the 1990 Heisman Trophy, and 28-21. It's one of those wins that BYU fans still to this day. It's just one of those. It was those games that you're outside the stadium and you knew something special was in the air. I mean, it was just this game, it was just something special. I mean, people love that game because you think of teams today in college football, and yes, there's amazing athletes and amazing talent, but man, that Miami team, that program was just unbeatable, and they had so much charisma and personality, and they were just everything about that was just cool about college football, and BYU knocked them off, and it's just amazing. And that win was something really special for the program. Made BYU feel that, because in 1984, when they won the national championship, people still felt that's a fraud. It should have been Washington. It should have been other programs. The BYU didn't deserve to win that title, but winning that game in '90 over Miami kind of was like, BYU, maybe they are legit. Maybe they are a big-time program. So I think that one by far is the best win all time. What do you remember that game at all? The 1990 Miami?
I remember it was a night game. I remember, I'm going to take a shot in the dark. I'm not positive. Was it a Thursday night game?
It was a Saturday. It was a Saturday
Oh, it was a Saturday.
ESPN.
I remember it was a night game. I remember it was ESPN. Yeah, I do very much remember that game. And you are totally correct when you talk about the aftermath of that '84 championship season, in which, if you look through who BYU played, you're not overly impressed. They did play the bowl situation back then. We think it's screwed up today. The way the bowl slottings were made back in 1984. They play a 6-5 Michigan team. They win the national title. They were the only undefeated team. And if you've ever listened to my video posts about the BCS, hey, if you win all your games, then that's pretty much the bottom line right there. Yeah. That said, yeah, 6 years ever since that game was played and BYU was able to win a national championship, and then to go forward from there. Yeah, you talked about them in a previous video post about them being the most hated team in college football, and off the top of my head, I thought, well, that's Notre Dame, that's Miami, that's some other programs, but yeah, that's part of what fueled that was this program doesn't deserve this national championship, so they had to validate that. They had to wait 6 years to validate it, but they laid it out there against, by far, the most talented team in college football. And so it was an amazing game, and it was that at some point Miami's going to overwhelm them with their speed and athleticism, but it just never happened, and BYU held on for a huge, huge win there. So, yeah, that was a great one that I do remember watching, no question about that. So what else you got for us, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, other games in that stand out in my mind. Let's turn to the more recent 2009 season opener. BYU knocks off number 3 Oklahoma in the first ever game in Jerry's World, new Dallas Cowboys Stadium. This Cowboys classic or kickoff that we're so accustomed to seeing each year. BYU was a part of that first ever game. Speaks to that was a special setting, BYU being in that game in that stadium, the first ever. It was pretty neat, and to knock off Oklahoma, who was a 21-point favorite, number 3 in the country. BYU in their own right was like number 21, so this was a BYU team led by senior Max Hall and a cast of talented players that later went on to the NFL. So BYU was pretty dang good in their own right, but and BYU arguably outplayed Oklahoma, and it could have been a blowout had it not been for many miscues and turnovers, but it ended up being a 14-13 win, and the biggest storyline was probably knocking out Sam Bradford. Linebacker Colby Clausen lays the hit on Sam Bradford, knocks out his shoulder, and Sam Bradford, of course, came back for his junior season, his junior season after he won the Heisman, and many questioned that and thought he should have went pro, and that was kind of validated with that injury. Oklahoma, of course, later that year went on to be 8-4, but it was arguably the toughest schedule in college football. All their losses came against ranked teams, including BYU. So when people try to knock off that game, it's that Oklahoma team was still talented. They had Gerald McCoy, they had Jermaine Gresham, and that team was loaded. And BYU, what was amazing about that game to me was BYU came in, and it was an off season in before 2009 where a lot of the morale around BYU football was kind of down. Their rival, Utah, just came off that undefeated season, knocked off Alabama, and won the Sugar Bowl. I mean, and BYU is still looking for that signature win in the Bronco Mendenhall era, and this was a great opportunity. I know it's not like a BCS Bowl, but in a way it kind of was. I mean, that setting, that game, nationally televised, it was a big deal. And what was great, too, about that game, it's had lasting impacts in terms of BYU's current status with in independence and ESPN. BYU was part of the Mountain Network, Little Seen Mount West Network, and BYU had such a strong history with ESPN for decades. And then in 2009, I know Dave Brown, one of the directors of programming, when he announced BYU was going to go independent, he said that game stood out. 2009 BYU Oklahoma was like, wow, BYU is such a huge draw in the national picture, and the ratings for that game were terrific, and that was something that kind of was maybe one of the pieces that put together a BYU and ESPN contract as a football independent. So that game was pretty special, and also what was significant about that game is the storylines after. You're seeing people like Kirk Herbstreit, national pundits, saying this non-BCS BYU team, they deserve to play for the national title if they go undefeated, which was mind-blowing to think that after week one, all these national pundits are giving a non-BCS team this respect, and that was something special, and that was really neat to be a part of that around the program, because BYU had not experienced that for quite some time, especially during the Bronco Mendenhall era. So that win definitely is up there. Some other games of note: the 1980 Holiday Bowl. I was watching another video you did, I believe it was with the Miami blogger from stateoftheu.com, and how you said that the Doug Flutie Miami game is very overrated. I think it is too. I think it's very overrated. I think the greatest finish in college football history is 1980 Holiday Bowl, BYU over the Pony Express, another 30 for 30 Pony Excess team. BYU took down SMU 46-45, down by 20 with 2.5 minutes left, and Jim McMahon caps it off with a Hail Mary pass to end the game. No one knows about it, though, because it was on the Little C Mizlou network, so no one knows that game even exists, but you of course do. But yeah, that one, 46-45, to take down the Pony Express, Craig James, Eric Dickerson, who were running like just wild on BYU's defense the whole night. I mean, SMU players are on the sideline waving to the camera, putting on the hats, getting Holiday Bowl champions, and winning that game too was BYU's first ever bowl win. They had become up winless on their first few attempts under Lavelle Edwards, so winning that one was pretty special.
Yeah, I was one of the fortunate few that in like 1978 got cable when I was like 8 years old, and it was when bowl season hit, and I love bowl season. I love it, and yes, 6-6 teams playing, and back then you would have to be 6-5 to get into a bowl game with an 11-game schedule. I still loved the bowl games, and back then, if you weren't playing in a major game or playing on the weekends, like in the Gator Bowl, ABC would pick up like a Gator Bowl and those kind of games. It was always a mystery because you'd have to go search through the TV guide in the newspaper to figure out who's going to pick up the Blue Bonnet Bowl or the Holiday Bowl. Where are we going to find this? And it was like Raycom Sports and like your local, for us, it was Channel 43 would pick up these random bowl games and be like, oh, yes, there it is. And, oh, my goodness, yeah, that finish was crazy. If I remember right, you said a 20-point game. Yeah, it was like something like 41-19 or something like that with just a few minutes left in the game, and it was just a crazy finish. And if you want to see a true Hail Mary with guys fighting for the football in the end zone, it's that SMU and Brigham Young game, the BYU game in the Holiday Bowl in 1980. That was amazing, and they just had that stretch of games where they built that reputation for that bowl game, and they built a reputation that BYU football is must-see football, because even if they're a little bit beyond and below the elite talent of college football, because they can sling it, and because they've got a quarterback who can put it on the money, got receivers who know how to run routes and find holes in the zone or beat man-to-man coverage, they can throw it, and they got just enough defense and other people in place that, yeah, they're going to just put a scare into anybody they play, and that was one of those games right there, despite SMU's vaunted rushing attack, of course, two of the great running backs of that time, and especially Dickerson. That was an amazing game as well, yeah. So I watched all those games, and I think the 2 years later after that, in 1983, so 3 years later, was Steve Young's last season at BYU when they took on Missouri in the Holiday Bowl. And it wasn't such a crazy affair, but it was just a really close football game late, and they pulled that one out like 21-17. They had a game against Wazoo in the Holiday Bowl right around that time as well in the early 80s. There was a back-and-forth affair that they pulled out 38-36. So those were just fun games to watch.
Oh yeah, I mean the Holiday Bowl was built by BYU. I mean the reputation it has now is arguably the best playoff non-New Year's Day bowl. I mean, that's because of BYU, and that's why I think a lot of bowl games are always fascinated by signing up with an independent BYU, because they have such a history of building up little-known bowls and making them something special, like you said, must-see TV. But outside of holiday bowls, which amazing games, I could go on for days about the holiday bowls. I'd also say 1984 at Pitt. When Pitt was something special, at Pitt Stadium. It's not this Heinz Field today. This was going into Pitt Stadium, number 3, and the first ever, talking about ESPN relationship, first ever ESPN college football live broadcast. There was tape delay games. I know BYU Long Beach State was one back in like 1981. That was pretty big deal back then. But to have a live ESPN broadcast, it was BYU versus Pitt, number 3 Pitt, and BYU broke in Robbie Bosco as the quarterback in that first drive for Robbie Bosco, following up the legends of Steve Young, Jim McMahon, Mark Wilson. That first drive, if it was any indication, it wasn't going to be pretty. The quarterback factory was not going to continue with Robbie Bosco, who was very shaken by the pressures. He even said it himself. When he looked up in the sky and he saw the Goodyear blimp, he thought, this is a big-time stage. This is big-time college football. And BYU getting that win at Pitt was the launching pad point for BYU to go and win the national championship in 1984, because going into that season, there were so many question marks about BYU. Obviously lost Steve Young. They weren't even a thought on the national radar. They weren't even picked to win the WAC, the league that BYU was dominating year after year. They weren't even picked to win that league, and they won the national championship, and it all started because that win at Pitt, number 3. And we can honestly thank BYU, or probably get upset with BYU because of that season, because now we've dealt with the Alliance, the BCS, and now the College Football Playoff. A lot of it stems from that 1984 national championship season, but it was all started because of that win at number 3 Pitt. And all other games too. 1979 at Texas A&M. This is probably one of those games that many BYU fans don't even know much about. BYU football under Lavelle Edwards, when he took over in 1972, very unsuccessful. There was a little bit of a stretch with Tommy Hudspeth before Lavelle took over, where they had some WAC championships, but on a national scale, BYU didn't really push the envelope at all. And 7 years in, BYU was building up something special. We saw the quarterback play and all these records being thrown through the air, and Lavelle kind of transcending the way football is played, because back then it was just running the football, the option and the wishbone. Lavelle said, we're going to pass the football. And in 1979, BYU traveled to Houston. It was a neutral site game in Rice Stadium. BYU took on a ranked Texas A&M squad and won 19-16, and that was pretty special, because that was a game that made BYU their first big win against a national opponent against Texas A&M. That was a pretty big moment for BYU back in '79. Other games staying in the Texas two-step here, 1996 or 1997 technically, Cotton Bowl. But the 1996 season, where they took down Kansas State, and it capped off the most wins ever in a college football season at the time, 14-1. BYU played 15 games in the season. They had the BCA Classic, they had a WAC championship, and they had a game at Hawaii. So it was this weird 15-game season. But they went 14-1. Finished number 5 in the polls, and they took off Bill Snyder and Kansas State, both teams playing in their first New Year's Day bowl game ever. So that was really special. And BYU felt shunned going into that game. They had a chip on their shoulder because they felt they belonged in the Fiesta Bowl, but the Bowl Alliance, and we all know with the Fiesta Bowl committee, John Junker, who announced this, the BYU snub on CBS that year, they announced that they were going to go with Texas, a 9-3 Texas team, over BYU, who played Penn State, and they got completely rolled by Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. So BYU was very upset that they didn't go that game, because BYU down in the state of Arizona, strong LDS and BYU fan base down there, they would have packed Sun Devil Stadium for that one, but they ended up in the Cotton Bowl. Didn't have as much numbers. It was a sea of purple in Dallas that day in the morning skies of the Cotton Bowl. but BYU pulled off quite a special win. It was an ugly game. Defensive battle, defensive slugfest, the most sacks ever by a BYU defensive player in that game by Shea Muirbrook, 7 sacks, defensive MVP of that game, and BYU walked away with a 19-15 win over the Wildcats.
Okay, Mitch, I'm going to throw a few more games at you, and I probably skew this toward the bowl games a little bit too much because I'm watching all college football and I don't catch BYU a ton. I always catch the bowl games. So we brought up Miami football. Well, of course, the ascent of Miami football started with the Orange Bowl win over Nebraska in 1984. Howard Schnellenberger, the coach, well, he grew into this legend, and he seemed to be kind of the Bill Parcells at the time of college football. Wherever he went, he could resurrect a program. He did that at Louisville to a certain extent. Then he goes to Oklahoma, and everybody thought, wow, Oklahoma's going to be Oklahoma again, because they were down for about 3 or 4 years after they brought in some coaches after Barry Switzer, brought in 2 coaches that I can think of after Barry Switzer. Oklahoma was down. Schnellenberger had kind of a paper tiger football team, as we found out when they took on BYU in the 1994 Copper Bowl. Oklahoma put together a pretty good season, again on paper, but the Big 8 at the time was a bit down, and BYU rolled them 31-6. Oklahoma was completely exposed in that game. Oregon in 2006. Now, this is just the start of their ascension, so they weren't the football program that they are now, but still, from Mike Bellotti taking Oregon to the Rose Bowl in 1994 against Penn State, they had a pretty good run there for 10 or 12 years where they were winning 8 and 9 football games per season, and BYU took them out in the 2006 Vegas Bowl 38-8, so that's a pretty nice win over a Pac-12 opponent right there in BYU knocking out the Ducks there. Yeah, 38-8 in that game.
Yeah, the Vegas Bowl, that 2006 season was pretty special. That was the season that BYU was back in a way. When Bronco Mendenhall took over in 2005, BYU was coming off 3 straight years of losing seasons, and that hadn't happened since BYU hadn't had a losing season since 1974. So BYU was in kind of uncharted grounds. Bronco came in 2005, got to a Vegas Bowl, lost to Cal, who was a very talented Cal team, Marshawn Lynch, Deshaun Jackson, lost by a touchdown in that one. But in 2006, BYU went 10-2, won a Mountain West title for the first time since 2001, and then played Oregon. Like I said, not the Oregon that we were accustomed to today, but they had Dennis Dixon at quarterback. So, and he later went on and was in the mix for the Heisman until he blew out, I want to say, his ACL against Arizona in 2008. So we all know that he was a very talented player, but BYU rolled him. And Gary Crowton was the offensive coordinator for Oregon that season. And that was a really special BYU team. It was one that started out 1-2, had close losses to Arizona and Boston College, who was ranked, had Matt Ryan at quarterback, but won out. It was a team by season's end that felt that they could have played anyone in the country and could have won. It was just a prolific offense. John Beck at quarterback, who later was a top 40 pick to the Miami Dolphins. Curtis Brown. I mean, they had some good players on that team, and they were just sound, and they just dominated their opposition. It was a rare day when they had a close game that season. So yeah, that Oregon one was pretty sweet, and it set off a string of bowl appearances in the Vegas Bowl because BYU was packing the house each year for Vegas. I mean, they had the first selection for the Mountain West every year. Instead of always taking necessarily the champ, they wanted to get BYU into that bowl slot because, oddly enough, it sounds weird, but a lot of Mormons are down in Vegas, so they they come in drives to Sam Boyd Stadium and fill up Sam Boyd for whenever BYU goes down there. That's why whenever BYU plays there, it feels like it's LaVell Edwards Stadium South, just how many BYU fans are always there. Also, speaking with bowl games, Vegas 2007, UCLA, 6-6 UCLA just fired Carl Durrell. BYU won on a blocked field goal by Ethan Manumaliuna. Kai Forbath kick for UCLA kicker. It's just a sloppy game. It was another 10-2 season Mountain West championship for BYU, but it was a weird game. That's why I was hesitant to put that up there. It was an amazing finish, but the game was so sloppy. I remember at the end of the first half, BYU up against their own goal line with a matter of seconds remaining in the half, they try to run some offensive plays, and then there's a turnover, and UCLA returns it for a touchdown, and really was a tone setter the rest of the night. And UCLA probably should have won that game, but BYU pulled off some heroics and blocked that kick and capped off another 11-2 season. Other games that I look at for bowl games. The 2011 Armed Forces Bowl, BYU played Tulsa, and Riley Nelson did a fake spike and threw to Cody Hoffman inside the 20, and BYU won on a last-second play against Tulsa. So BYU's had, like you said earlier, must-see football games. I mean, they've played in some amazing games, and they've had a lot of close calls over the years too. But some great wins that have always left BYU fans feeling like, when's that next moment going to happen? I think many people feel that there's going to be a lot of special ones this year. So.
Yeah, it's a unique football program with a unique football history, and it was fun to talk about it. Mitch Harper of LawlessRepublic.com and Cougar Center as well. Hey, Mitch, we hate to do this to you, but we're going to bring you back, and we're going to talk about some crushing losses, because that's the other side of the coin. So we got to do it. So we got Mitch Harper here talking about BYU's best wins in history. Invite you to join in and leave your comments as well. Mitch, we'll have you right back.
All right. Look, I'm sadly looking forward to it, I think.